Okay, in this walkthrough, we're going to be taking a closer look at the Arkanoid device. So once you have installed the arcade pack, you'll find in the packs folder all of the arcade devices. And there are 4 devices in the pack, but there is a separate version for each device for all of the supported controllers. So that will be for all of the Launchpads, Marks 1, 2, and the Pro version. Machine Jam, and also Push 1 and Push 2. So we're going to be using Push 2 for this demo. So I've got the Push 2 version of Arkanoid loaded here. So Arkanoid is based on the classic arcade game Arkanoid, where you have this kind of sort of 3D looking space, and you were controlling a little ship, and you were bouncing the balls around kind of in a sort of a diagonal process to chip away at the kind of blocks at the top. And what we've done with this device is we've tried to take some of the diagonal movements and turn it into a sequencer, because usually when we're working with these kind of 8x8 layouts, things are either going horizontally or vertically. So we thought it was something interesting to try something diagonal. So the first thing we need to do is we need to select our control surface. So we have the arcade, the Push 2 version of this arcade device. You must click on the small button here. This will refresh the menu and create an up-to-date list of any connected control surfaces, and then we can choose Push 2. On Push 2 and Push 1, it will by default take over the 8x8 matrix and a few of the buttons as well. You can release this control by just clicking the arcade button and turning it off, and it resumes normal behavior. With it on, it takes over Push, but only whilst the device is in focus. If you switch to another device or another track, the focus is lost. But if you would like to keep this focus locked to this control surface, simply click the little device lock button, and this allows you to switch tracks, but keep the arcade device present on this particular control surface. Okay, so Arkanoid is it's a melodic sequencer. That's what it's been designed for. So you'd probably be using it with sort of synthesizers or any kind of tuned instruments, really. And what we have is we have a 7x8 grid in the top layer, and then the bottom layer is where we fire our sort of moving balls from. So if we just hit play, and we can have up to 4 sort of sequences moving at the same time, which I'll go through in a moment. So let's choose number 1, and we can see there are some settings over here. So each one of these has its own dedicated sort of control section where you can have all these different settings. First of all, we might want to choose the direction that it's moving in. So let's say we're going to go left. When we press any of the bottom pads, it triggers the ball and it bounces around. And what we have on the main 7x8 grid are note triggers. So if the ball passes over any of these, it will trigger a note. And this is what we can edit here. We can change this grid. We could take the ones off the bottom. I'll put them back. The slightly brighter ones are accent notes. You can access these by holding down Shift, and you can add or remove accent notes, and you can choose how the level of the accent notes there. And that means if our velocity is set quite low, but our accent is on max, we'll get quite a big difference when we trigger an accent note, like so. We can randomize the velocity also, and we can choose how much the accent is applied to a particular moving ball, and each of these are independent from each other, from the other 4. We can choose how fast this is running. All of these controls can be controlled at the top of Push as well. So if you just click on the device name there, you get a few different banks. So banks 1 to 4 are controlling each of the 4 moving balls, so you can choose the rate. We can choose things like the octave as well. And we can also choose the grid, which I'll come on to in a moment. So what we're going to get with this, the way this moves around, because it's a 7x8 grid, it sort of comes around in a cycle, and it will start to repeat itself. Once it's done enough rotations, it comes back to its starting point. And when you add another one in, and you can re-trigger these at any time. So if I have the yellow one selected here, so I was just re-triggering, and it was hitting the first sort of ball that was triggering a particular note. And at any time you can completely edit the grid of notes, and really the beauty of this is just coming up with different shapes, and it will create sort of a different interaction between the balls that are triggering them. Okay, let's try some presets. There are presets in the little drop-down menu here. Let's try chicanes. So to explain how the notes are being generated, like what the actual notes are, because all we're doing really here is we're choosing if a note is triggered or not. The actual pitch of the notes, or the actual note, is determined by the grid here. So the grid, you have a drop-down menu. And essentially what's happening is the notes are already pre-laid out underneath this layer, if you like, and we have these different variations. If you look in the manual, you will see a visual explanation of how the notes are laid out. And what it's showing us is, for example, on the vertical one, the lowest note is starting here, and it goes up to the top, and then it goes up there and then up there. So we're starting with the lowest note here and we're ending with the highest note there. Vertical minus is the opposite. The lowest note starts in the top right corner and they kind of come down to the bottom left corner, and so on. And that was just a way of getting different notes laid out. So rather than having to spend time choosing what note you are going to trigger, you can just have fun choosing where the note triggers are and playing with the kind of moving element of the sequencer. All of the notes will conform to the selected scale over in the global section, and also the key. So by having the different sequencer engines running at different rates, different velocities, different ranges, different octaves, we can get fairly complex melodic patterns running. And something you might want to do is capture a loop of what's going on. So if I sort of stop some of the other balls running, if I hold down Shift, I can deactivate some of the balls. Let's do this. Okay, So what I can do is I can capture a loop of this, and how I do that is with the looper. Each Arkanoid board has its own looper, and I can choose a number of steps. So I've got 8 steps selected here, and if I turn this on, okay, let's bring the next one in and loop 8 steps of the blue one. And then the same with the pink one. I need to re-loop that one. Okay, and we can still change the settings of these as they're playing. So I could change the random velocity of the blue one, bring in the green one. So even though it looks like they're moving quite randomly, they are looping 8 steps of their sort of sequence. If you want to capture a loop of the entire MIDI data that's being generated by the device, then you can use the MIDI looper over on the left hand side here. What we can do here is capture the data that's actually being generated by the device, and it takes over and plays back that MIDI data rather than using the actual internal sequencer. So this has 2 functions. One, it's really useful for performance if you just want to capture a 2-bar loop that was kind of moving and changing, and you just want to capture it as it is and keep it repeating over, similar to how you might just capture a MIDI loop on a clip in live. But also it lets you very quickly convert what you're doing into a MIDI clip rather than having to set up a separate MIDI channel and perform all the necessary routing options. So the looper can capture 1, 2, 4 or 8 bars linked to the time signature. I'll set it to 2. So this is now recording. And now we have the looper is what we're listening to. It's playing back the looped sequence. We're not hearing anything that's being generated by the sequencers. So if we change any of the settings, it won't make any difference. If you want to capture a new loop, just click this again. We now go back to the sequencer, it's recording a new loop, and then begins playback again. And if I want to turn that into a clip, I can just use the little arrow buttons here, or just select a clip slot, click, clip, and now if we look inside, we have captured that MIDI data. And if we want to capture a new loop, create another clip. There we go. So it's also a very quick way of just capturing a lot of the sort of cyclic and random elements that you might get from the sequencer and just turning them into little 2 or 4 bar loops that you might want to use in composition. At any point, click the red button to stop the loop and return back to the main sequencer. We have some MIDI options as well. The MIDI options is determining if MIDI is routed into the device or through. At the moment it's turned off. If we turn through on and we deactivate the takeover of the control surface, we can now trigger the instrument with our controller as usual. If we choose in, this works a little bit differently. It means the MIDI now from your controller or your keyboard is routed to the key of the note. So we're in C or up to D. So it means you can transpose with your keyboard as opposed to having to automate it. We also have swing for each of the 4 Arkanoid sequencers. You have the slider amount to control how much swing is applied, and then an on-off for each one. If the swing is orange, it means the rate is set to an uncompatible rate. So swing is only applied if the rate is either 16th notes, 8th notes, or 30-second notes. It won't work if it's anything else, so it will just automatically bypass. At any point you can stop the currently selected, or you can stop all of the moving balls, and you can also clear the main grid matrix as well. Holding down Shift and clicking one of the scene launch buttons also stops an individual sequencer from running. For more info and more devices, check out the Isotonic Studios website, and be sure to check out the additional manuals for each of the arcade devices in this pack.